Hey man, Shane here. If you want to get stronger for your size, then you can focus on lifting weights and eating enough protein. But if you want to get bigger and stronger, then you also need to gain weight. And different rates of weight gain tend to yield different proportions of muscle growth and fat storage. In this study, they took 11 natural bodybuilders and put them on a 1-month bulking program. Half of them ate in a moderate surplus, making fairly lean gains. The other half ate in a huge surplus, gaining twice as much muscle, but also 6 times as much fat. At a glance, this seems to suggest that if you want leaner gains, you should bulk at a moderate pace, gaining up to around a pound per week. Whereas if you want to maximize muscle growth, you should bulk more aggressively, gaining more like 2 pounds per week. But that's not quite right. Let's dive into it. There are 2 different types of bulks people tend to gravitate towards. First, there's the lean bulk, where people try to minimize fat gain. And second, there's the aggressive bulk, where people try to maximize the rate of muscle growth. There's also dirty bulking, but that's a different beast, and we'll save that for another video. When you do a lean bulk, you'll gain less fat, obviously. That's why most people do it, but there are a few more advantages too. If you're eating enough carbs, even a small surplus should be enough to pack your muscles full of glycogen, making them look fuller and harder, improving your workout performance, and potentially even increasing your rate of muscle growth. Another cool advantage, especially for us skinny guys, is that when you're in a small surplus, you won't need to eat that much extra food. That means you won't produce as much body heat, you won't feel as tired after eating, and there's less stress on your digestive system. But there are downsides too. The most obvious one is that you'll build muscle more slowly. Another downside that most people overlook is that you'll need to be much more precise with your calorie intake if you want to build muscle consistently. After all, if you want to eat by even a little bit, you'll fall out of your calorie surplus and your muscle growth will grind to a groaning halt. When you bulk more aggressively, the most obvious advantage is that you have a better chance of building muscle faster. And just like with a smaller calorie surplus, you'll pack your muscles full of glycogen, getting a ton of great benefits. There's also a much larger margin of error, allowing you to be more casual with your calorie intake. For example, if you're aiming for a surplus of 500 calories per day, but you accidentally undereat by 300 calories, you're still in a 200 calorie surplus, and so you'll still build muscle just fine. Another advantage, if you want to call it an advantage, is that any extra fat you gain is extra energy that you can use to build or retain muscle in an emergency, such as when you forget to eat dinner or when you get sick. And if you finish your bulk a little bit fluffier, you might be able to go through a period of body recomposition where you continue gaining strength and muscle without needing to gain any extra weight. Maybe. The downside of bulking more aggressively is that you might gain too much fat, you might need to end your bulk sooner, and you might need to go on a cut afterwards. For a lot of us skinny guys, allowing ourselves to lose a bit of weight is a pleasant break after a big bulk, but some people have a harder time of it. It depends on the person. The other downside is that you'll need to eat and digest more food. That means you're more likely to feel tired, bloated, hot, and full. You'll be stuffed to the gills, and that can totally suck. Now, I want to clarify something. You have some guys, like GK, who bulk very aggressively and also gain very little fat. And then you have other guys who bulk more cautiously and gain proportionally more fat, even though they're being very careful. That's because your rate of weight gain isn't the only factor that affects how much muscle and fat you gain. By far the most important factor is hypertrophy training. The better your workout program is, the better you follow it, and the more effort you put into it, then the more muscle growth you'll stimulate. And when you stimulate more growth, more of the calories you eat will be invested into muscle growth, and fewer will be left over to store as fat. You'll also find guys who only train some of their muscles. For instance, if you're neglecting your squats and your deadlifts, then you're neglecting the biggest muscles in your body, your quads and your glutes, and so you'll need to bulk at a much slower pace. There's a slew of other important factors too, such as sleep, genetics, diet, and lifestyle. But your training is probably where you have the greatest room for improvement. Even just choosing better exercise variations can double or even triple your rate of muscle growth. The good news is there are plenty of great hypertrophy programs out there, including ours. And if you put in the work and you eat enough food, then you'll reap the rewards. Now let's talk about which path you should venture down. Should you bulk more leanly or more aggressively? If you're skinny, you're naturally lean, and you're desperate to build muscle, then aggressive bulking tends to work quite well. You've got a ton of room on your frame for growth, and so if you're following a good bulking program, you should be able to gain muscle pretty quickly and pretty leanly, even when you're more aggressive with it. If you're skinny fat, have a tendency to store fat more easily, or you've got some digestive issues, then a more cautious approach tends to work better. Also keep in mind that if you're starting with a higher body fat percentage, that puts you in a good position to build muscle with a much smaller calorie surplus. In fact, if you're beyond the upper reaches of the healthy range, over around 20% body fat, you might want to build muscle without gaining any weight at all. You only really need to gear into a bulk when you can no longer progressively overload your lifts. So if you're skinny, fat, or overweight and you're new to lifting, then feel free to eat according to your appetite without really worrying about whether you're gaining weight or not. On the other hand, if you're skinny, like I was, then feel free to push it a bit harder. Most bulking guidelines will tell you to gain a certain percent of your body weight each week. For example, in this review by Iraqi colleagues, they recommend gaining 0.25 to 0.5% of your body weight each week. In my case, at 200 pounds, that means gaining 0.5 to 1 pound every week. Here's the problem. If you're skinny, say 130 pounds, then that means you should only be gaining 0.3 to 0.6 pounds per week. And that doesn't make any sense. I get the idea. It's supposed to separate people with larger frames from people with smaller frames. But if you're skinnier, then you're lighter, and so it will tell you to bulk more slowly. But your potential rate of muscle growth is actually quite a bit higher than other people who might weigh the same amount as you. In my case, I could build muscle much faster at 130 pounds than I can now at 200 pounds. These guidelines are telling me that the heavier I get, the faster I should bulk. It's backwards. The good news is we've helped thousands of skinny people bulk up over the past decade, so we've got a pretty good idea of how fast you can expect to build muscle. To get a very modest idea of your own potential, you could take your height in centimeters and subtract 100. In my case, that's 188 minus 100, giving 88 kilos, or 194 pounds. I'm a little heavier than that right now, and I think I could still gain another 20 pounds, but even so, it still puts me in the right neighborhood. You can use that goal weight to determine your target rate of weight gain. A cautious bulk is on the slower side, so think of gaining up to around 0.25% of your goal weight each week, which is usually around half a pound per week. To do that, you'll want a calorie surplus of something like 200 to 250 calories per day. An aggressive bulk is on the faster side, gaining more like 0.5% of your goal weight, which is usually something like a pound per week. That's a calorie surplus of more like 400 to 500 calories per day. And of course, remember to progressively overload your calories. Weigh yourself every week, and if you aren't gaining weight fast enough, add another 200 calories into your diet. Keep weighing yourself and keep adding more calories whenever you need to. Here's the interesting part though. During your first couple weeks of bulking, you might find that you gain weight even faster. Creatine is pulling water into your muscles, the extra carbs you're eating are pumping you full of glycogen, and all the extra food you're eating is weighing down your digestive system. As a result, it's normal to gain 2 or 3 pounds during your first week or two of bulking, but that rapid pace should level off once you reach a new equilibrium. If we go back to that initial RIBEIRO study, you'll notice that both groups of bodybuilders were bulking pretty aggressively. Even the slower group was gaining almost a pound per week on average. The other thing to consider though is that this study was only a month long, and as you now know, it's normal for people to gain a bunch of extra weight when they first gear into a bulk. These bodybuilders were probably gaining some extra glycogen in their muscles, retaining some extra water, and processing some extra food in their digestive systems. All of that counts as extra lean weight, inflating their numbers. So I think we should look at these rates of weight gain as being pretty realistic during your first month of bulking, and then not so realistic afterwards. After those first exhilarating weeks, I think it makes sense to cap your weight gain at around a pound per week, even if you're trying to fully maximize your rate of muscle growth. Maybe that means gaining 6 or 7 pounds during your first month of bulking, and then gaining more like 3 to 4 pounds in the months after that. And then, if you notice you're starting to accumulate body fat, you can slow the pace down even further. But remember, as long as you're within the healthy range, that extra fat isn't necessarily a bad thing. It will give you a deeper reserve of energy to draw upon. Think of the fat around your gut like a little fanny pack full of trail mix. Whenever you need more energy, your body can reach in and grab those extra calories. I should also mention that a lot of studies find tremendous rates of lean muscle growth in a variety of different situations. If you're winging it in the gym right now, your diet isn't dialed in, and your lifestyle isn't great, then by optimizing your methods, you might be able to gain muscle much faster than you think, especially if you're still fairly thin. We see it all the time. That doesn't mean you should rush it, but it does mean that if you're willing to put in the work, you might be able to gain muscle quite fast. Alright, that's it for now. The next video is a bit controversial, but we've gotten a lot of questions about it, so I feel like we should cover it. If you want me to let you know when it's ready, gently press the subscriber button and then ding the notification bell. I hope to see you there.